Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Well, welcome, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I am so excited to have you on this morning. I know actually very little about your story, which is exciting for me because I love to have people on that I don't know anything about.
Okay.
Because then I get to learn a lot and the viewers get to learn a lot, and it's great.
That'd be nice, yeah.
So today, though, just as like a little teaser, so you are currently a therapist, is that correct?
Psychologist, yeah.
Psychologist. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that are facing young adults today, and we'll go into that. But first, we're going to jump into your story. So I would love to just kind of hear your background and what your vocation story was like and how your faith led you into what you're doing now in psychology and all of that. So I'll just leave it up to you.
Okay. Well, it was a dark and stormy night. No, I was born in New Mexico. Grew up down there. My dad was on the state police, so we moved a lot. So I was born in Santa Fe, and then we moved every 2 years because they had a police protection program back then. So to keep the police from being killed by the drug dealers, they moved them every 2 years. So I lived in Santa Fe and Gallup and Albuquerque and Roswell and Tucumcari. We just moved. And they were picking up, 24 to 26 tons of marijuana a month. Pretty much everybody they stopped had a carload of drugs. And so guys just get shot out in the desert. So he was like, this is too dangerous. So him and a bunch of his buddies said, let's get to a safer job. So we moved to Wyoming, and there they went into all the police officers that left together became Texaco gas station managers. And so we were living in Sheridan, Wyoming at the time. And so we had one station, then two stations, by when I was going to school there. And then they've got, he got bursitis in his knees from walking on the cement. So we had to get off the cement. So then we moved to West Yellowstone, and they had a motel. And so that was, so I started high school in Wyoming and then went to West Yellowstone. And then the crisis of the economy in the 70s, they said, hey, we should move closer to Canada because then we'd have that economy. Mm-hmm. So they got a motel up by Glacier Park. And so I went to high school in 3 different places. And so then I ended up graduating from there and went to Montana State. So that was kind of I went all over the place just growing up. But yeah, I was born and raised Catholic and did, confirmation Catholic schools when I was in New Mexico. And then up until high school, I guess I was Catholic school. And then I shifted to public schools for that last 4 years. And like I said, I went to Montana State and was living there. And at that point, I was kind of looking at, being a priest or, I was kind of interested that there's a vocation idea there. And I had a spiritual director at the time. And I said, well, should I be a counselor or should I be a priest? And he's like, well, they really frown on you going and getting married and divorcing and then being a priest. So why don't you try the priesthood first? And so, good advice. Yeah, so I ended up going to Mount Angel. And so I went over there and I was through that program. I did the pre-theology because my college degree was in social research, and so I had the sociology degree with statistics and computer programming and English minors. Wow. So I could do research projects, and I did that for a year, and it was really boring. So just like you're sitting in the basement of the library, because back then they didn't have laptops, so it was like mainframe computers at a university, and so you're sitting in a basement, and I had this office that was like a couple walls and chicken wire and a big metal military desk, and you're typing in a program and checking data, and then you run a program overnight, and the next day you check the printout with the stuff on the screen to see if it ran the program you were supposed to run. And I'm just like, after a year of that, I'm like, I want to talk to people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So then that was that shift to counseling. And then I started with at University of Montana in Missoula in their counseling program to be like a school counselor. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was kind of struggling with be a counselor, be a priest. And my spiritual director says, yeah, go to Mount Angel. So I went over there and I went through that program. And just as I was going through that, I'm just seeing like, being married, being a priest, and just being single. And kind of like a lot of those priests were just off by themselves in Montana. They're a long way away from each other and just kind of driving the circuit, saying mass. And that was kind of like not really pulling me so much anymore. But I did get a degree from there. So I've got a master's degree in scripture from Mount Angel. And then that's when I shifted into psychology. And well, technically, I was working as a DRE, director of religious ed, at a parish in Oregon, because I had finished the seminary. Well, I finished the degree at the seminary, but didn't keep going that last year to get the diaconate or the ordination. But I was working there, and I had the degree, and I was teaching, and pretty much doing everything except saying mass at a parish there. And then people were coming to me for marriage advice and marriage counseling. And I'm like, I had like a semester, so I need more training. And so then I went and got my doctorate and overqualified myself for working at the church. And I was just like, I've got too much student loan debt. So I got to actually go into a practice there. So we were looking, because I was living in Oregon at the time. And that was about the time they were shifting from kind of regular counseling to managed care. That was kind of the big thing back then. It was in the 80s. And so early 90s. And I went from a full load of clients with a waiting list down to 2 people in like a month. Because Oregon set up this thing where, if you wanted counseling, you'd have to call an 800 number at the state. And they'd say, okay, well, we're going to send you over here. And then you'd have to call that number in that clinic and then go through it again. And they'd say, well, we'll send you to this therapist. And then you go through it again. So by the time they saw me, they had gone through 4 intakes. And people were just like, I don't want to do that. And they'd drop out. And so the government was saying like, look, we solved mental health problems. There isn't any. They just made it so difficult nobody could go. Or they would say like, well, you live here, but they have openings over there. And so, I was on one side of Portland and they'd send you to the other side because that clinic had openings, and so it was just a lot of micromanaging stuff. And so we're like, hey, and the other thing was we were having, by then I was married and had children, and every spring the state would run out of money. And so the teachers would go on strike to get funding for the rest of that school year. But that was happening every spring. And so we're like, we don't want to raise our kids here. And so we were looking between here and Spokane and ended up moving here. And it was just back then we'd come to Boise and they're like, it's a good place to raise your kids. Yeah. And that was kind of the town phrase. And we're just like, okay. And, we were coming from Portland. So that was like, okay, we were, accepted kind of thing, kind of doing that. So we moved here back in 95. And so I've been here since then and worked at a couple clinics in town, but then started my own. And so now we have Cornerstone Psychological, and it's a little group practice with, several of us there, and, about half of them are Catholic.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So so when you approach these kinds of questions, how has your faith influenced you, or how did that really work out when you were working in Oregon? Was your faith influencing how you were providing care, or?
Well, because I had that background from the seminary, it's just like I have that scripture degree. And so then I went to George Fox, which is Christian counseling, from a Quaker perspective, but they were saying like, oh, well, you got that degree. So they waived all the religion classes and just let me kind of clip those in. And so I imported that master's degree into the psychology degree. So that made it easier to do that. But then so that was really training in Christian counseling. And so I've just been kind of modifying it to Catholic. But so, yeah, I can do secular counseling, Christian counseling, Catholic counseling, and have that wide variety there. Coming here, I have really kind of a lot of specialties in different types of attachment therapy. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of, my work is a blend of the Catholic faith with attachment therapy and behavior therapy and cognitive therapy, and then chronic pain management and working with kind of your spiritual life. And that, I guess, just really able to take folks from where they're at and move them forwards that way. So that's been helpful. Right now, I have private practice. I'm at St. Mark's as the psychologist there at the school. So I'm there Monday morning and Friday morning. Then I'm also on the diocesan exorcism team as the psychologist for folks that are saying, like, are they possessed or is it a mental health issue, and kind of doing evaluations and sorting that out, or doing therapy with folks in that part. So I've been getting more involved in Catholic counseling and psychology that way. I'm a member of the Catholic Psychology Association nationally, and I'm on Father Rittberger's team, National Exorcist Training. And so we do an annual international conference every year. We just did one last month, and I'm doing, they're taking Thomas Aquinas and saying, like, what he talked about, how people work, is right.
Yeah.
And so then we're taking psychology and saying, like, well, the tools in psychology are effective, but they don't have a direction. So we're putting that together to say, now, using virtue in therapy, you have a direction and you're going towards, living peace and calm and kind of a better lifestyle, just kind of like based on our nature and how we work. And so it's really pretty exciting.
I think I asked this to someone previously, but I feel like you're a little more qualified to ask or answer this question. But when you see Catholics, okay, so let's talk about, I think people probably close to my age and younger, their idea is, like, we see a lot of commercials, social media commercials for, like, Better Health or all these other programs, and it seems like therapy is now becoming like the catch-all kind of like new religion in a way. Not saying that it is a religion, but I think that a lot of people use it as a tool to neglect, like, if they don't have a spiritual life, this is how they're kind of compensating to be okay with their purpose and all these things. So I guess when you talk to Catholics, how do you combat that? Because I know on the other side, I have, like, my older siblings and even some of my, like, older relatives, they talk really down on therapy a lot as, like, no, you just need to, like, work on your spiritual life more. So how does, like, your spiritual life and your mental health, how do they connect, and what's a healthy way to think about those things together?
Wow, this is really good. Okay, well, just sign up for a week. Here we go.
Okay.
We're going to start. So the idea of if with neuroscience and what they figured out about how your brain works, and then with the church and saying, here's what they teach. A little secret here is, like, if you do what the church teaches, you get healthy. Stuff clears up. And if you do what's kind of good mental health, that has kind of a moral line to it, if it's lining up with being your best self, to steal from Matthew Kelly.
Yeah.
It's like, that works. So putting the two together is really kind of the best of both worlds. And so, like, say, if you were coming in and saying, like, you're Catholic, you're wanting to go therapy, you had some problems with something, then the first part is just education about, well, here's what's going on. Here's what the game board looks like, and what the pieces do in this, kind of chess match inside your head. So the idea is, from attachment therapy, they're saying, like, when a baby's born, they don't have language, but they're trying to communicate, like, that, I'm dying, like, every 2 hours there's this, I'm dying, that kind of thing. And so you're, as a parent, saying, like, hey, there's pain, I'm going to give you some care. But you don't know what they need. So you just trial and error to kind of see, is it food? Is it a diaper? Is it a burp? Is it, a rash or something? And then when it matches up, like, say they're hungry, you feed them, they're like, nom, 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 and then they calm down. And so God made us to go from pain to calm. It's like, on a biology level, we're trying to get to calm. That emotional level is like I express the pain, I want you to care, and then I feel close to you. And on a spiritual level, they're saying like, hey, you have the angel on your shoulder, devil on your shoulder. One saying like, nobody cares. And the other's like, oh my gosh, you love me, and that's really wonderful. And so the idea of that, those three different layers are working to the same purpose. So the spirituality is definitely a part of it. But for folks that are like, they're not spiritual, or they don't have any connection with God, or they're religious but not spiritual, or those kind of things, to say, okay, well, your biology is still based on the natural law that God wrote in you, and that's why you can have like a terribly abusive childhood. You get away from that, and then you can raise your kids and not abuse them, because you have the sense of what's right in you. That's that natural law. That's that God put rules in there, saying like, okay, if you follow it, you turn right side up, you heal, you improve. And then even like folks that have really alcoholic parents can raise kids and kind of break out of that alcoholic, cycle. But that's kind of what it's like. There's a spiritual part there that's really important to pay attention to, if you can handle hearing that level of here's how you work. And so that's the first part. Then you can say, okay, now it's a two-part process. So if I say, that if we do the baby, I'm in pain, I don't have language, you figure it out over the year. And so a little technical thing that God put in there is to say like, I express pain, you take it away. I express pain, you take it away. Every 2 hours, 24/7 for the first year of life. That's a bonding process. So now when I have pain, I go to you because you take it away. And so God says, okay, after about 12 months, poof, you can walk. And so wherever you go, the baby follows. Yeah. But if the baby walks before 12 months, they didn't get it, and then you got to follow them. It's just like, oh my gosh, there they go. Come back. You're like, no, I'm going to go do it, And so that's that kind of, it has a purpose. It's like time, repetition, building a pattern, and then you grow in that connection. And so then, as an adult, you have language. So I can then take care of myself, say like, oh, it's time for breakfast. Go get myself some breakfast. Or I can say, honey, I'm hungry. Would you make me some? And then you would make me my favorite breakfast because you're awesome. Because I can communicate and you care and I'm asking for something. So that's the idea, is that it's a two-part process. The first part is I'm expressing pain or stress or anger or whatever it is. And then the second part is I got to recharge. I got to fill back up. So if I do something like, say, if you're just a mom, taking care of your kids, it drains you out. I love them, but it drains me out. So at the end of the day, I need to do something to recharge me. I'm not selfish. I'm just recharging so I can be a good mom tomorrow. Yeah. So it's really, that balance of I need to take turns where I'm caring for them, then caring for myself. Or like they say in the airplane, it's like, well, it's the crash, the mask comes down, put it on yourself and then put it on the baby, because then you'll be able to breathe and be able to finish the task instead of passing out halfway and then you both die. So the idea there is saying, not only is it a two-part process, but it's physically two locations inside you. And so that first part that is like, oh my gosh, I'm dying here. Well, let's shift it to a marriage example. To say, when I was first married, I wasn't a therapist. And so I'd be cooking because I like to cook. And I grew up in New Mexico, so I'm making chili. And my wife would come in and say, what are you making that for? The back of my brain fires off. You just attacked me.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my gosh, you just attacked me. It's just like, it's fast. So there's physically a location. And if we had the little map here, I have in my office, but it's just like saying your amygdala, your limbic system, I call it back brain, is just, it fires off worst case scenario. You just attacked me. And then I'd say, what are you attacking me for? I'm not attacking you. And then we'd fight. It became true. But later we got some brain studies, because when I was first a psychologist, they didn't know all this. Now they've done brain studies and say like, what's going on and what parts are doing what. And so now you have this thing of saying like, okay, so the back of my brain fires off this, you just attacked me. And there's physically a wave of brain chemistry that goes with that. And the smallest dose of stress I can get is 60 seconds. And so you just asked me a question and poof, you attacked me, and it goes for 60 seconds. If I don't do anything, it goes away and I get out of it. So good news there. And then, but see, separate from that, you have the prefrontal cortex, the front brain. That's like me. I'm loving, I'm smart, I'm helpful, I care. And so that part of me said, well, we're married. This is a wonderful thing. You care for me. that was just an information question. And now, go back to, I'm making chili. You say, what are you making that for? Back of my brain fires off. You just attacked me. I have to physically choose to say, that was just an information question. Well, the back of my own head says, you just got attacked. And if I hold on for 60 seconds and say, just information, back of my brain settles down. I say, hey, I'm making this because if I take lunch, it saves us $20 a day. And you're like, oh, that's a great idea. Thanks for saving us money. That becomes true. So which path I go with makes a difference. So the thing that you're looking at now is to say, that string of thoughts you have in your head? It's actually two. Sorting it into the two different pathways gives you control and choice back to say, do I go with that? Sometimes I might need to watch out, cars are driving, or I might be like, no, that was an information question. But having that sorted out gives you, I'm stepping back, I'm getting control. There's your free will. And that's what, the church is talking about.
What's so funny is on my podcast with Father John Mosier, I actually talked about this, but my spiritual advisor at Belmont Abbey, she used to tell me that really we are the dial, like if you're looking at it like a dial, and she says you have thoughts from like the Holy Spirit and like, she's like, this is just an analogy, like a visual. And she's like, you have thoughts from the Holy Spirit, then you have thoughts from the devil, and really you're just the dial. Like you're just the one that whatever you're going to listen to. And she's like, obviously if your spiritual life is strong, you're going to choose the better option. And so she always talked about that as like a visual for understanding that. But it makes sense, like as you're talking about how the church, if you follow its teachings, you're going to kind of learn some of these behaviors. Is that what you were saying? Or
well, yeah, because it's the idea of if we're using virtue is to say that there's kind of the justice is in parenting is basic obedience. It's just like, come here. If I say come here, put that away, just go over there, stop, don't, that kind of thing. It's just like for the child or the other person being able to follow directions. That's the first virtue of justice. Then you have prudence to say, well, how much do I need? And then there's temperance and fortitude. And so those prudence, temperance, and fortitude work together, and that's kind of the gears that move you forward. And so how that would play out is if more chili analogies, or if you're making sourdough bread, say like, okay, so if you're got a menu theme. So if you're cooking something and it takes, like with the sourdough bread cake, it takes a couple days to make it from scratch. You got to build it and feed it, and then you grow the dough, and then you cook it. And so the fortitude is I spend the time it takes to make a good loaf of bread. But then, when I was in college, it's like it's coming out of the oven. It smells so good. I'm watching a movie. I eat the whole loaf. And so then I need the temperance to say, like, well, just cut a slice and have it later. Or, I'd make a whole crock pot of chili verde, and then be like, I'd eat the whole thing one night, and I'd be like sick for 3 days because I ate so much. And I say, like, so that balance of I can do the effort to make the good thing, but then I have to have the self-control to not eat it all that day. I can spread it out. I have 4 lunches instead of just one giant meal. So it's just like those college days are gone. I can't eat that much anymore. So the idea is that how much do I need? Can I do the hard stuff because there's a goal I'm going towards? And can I kind of say no to myself and not just go to like, hey, that was fun, eat it all, or that was fun, do it all, and got a family I'm working with that, the wife liked to sew. They went to a craft festival, and he's like, hey, that looks like fun. So they got his and her sewing machines, and then they just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And they just made stuff for like 6 days, just so. And then at the end of it, they're just like, oh, we're so sick of this. And they haven't touched them since. It's been months, but it's just like, if I do it all the way to the end, it's just, it's too much. So that temperance is saying like, I do enough, but leave wanting a little more. So then I can come back. And so then in parenting, it's saying like, I'm in training mode and the kids don't know. It's like the difference between me and them is like, I know stuff and they don't. So I'm going to be guiding them. And so I give them a little, like the fortitude is like, come on, go do it, come back, do it again. And the temperance is like, hey, you got to turn that off and, get ready for bed kind of stuff. So it's like, it's just little guidance, little guardrails here, do a little more of this, little less of that. So I don't have to be angry. It's just like, hey, I'm just teaching them. Yeah. And I'm guiding them rather than, oh my gosh, you did this, and I got to blow up at you, and then you're responding to, oh my gosh, Dad's really losing it, kind of thing. Let's hide from Dad. So the idea is that sorting out And I've traced it back 6,000 years, that people had this idea of an angel on your shoulder, devil on your shoulder. And St. Paul writes about, the stuff I do, I don't want to do, and the stuff I don't do that, I want to do. And that struggle is like, okay, so they had it mapped out even back in the Old Testament, that there's this kind of desire to do stuff, but you get a resistance, or the good stuff you want to do and there's a resistance. And there's this pull towards do the bad stuff that's kind of selfish, or, eat all the bread, kind of thing, eat all the candy bars kind of thing. So it's just that work of building that discipline of saying like, hey, how do we get that to work together? And so that's back to the counseling thing, is to say, well, you got two brain pathways. Mm-hmm. How do you sort them out? Well, the fast one's always the worst case. You're going to attack me. And if it isn't bad out there, it doesn't shut up. It's like, I'm bad, I shouldn't have said it. And it's self-critical. So it's either
Can you say that again? Sorry.
So that back of my brain, that amygdala, is just you're bad or I'm bad. Somebody's bad around here. It just does protection. It never says I love you. It says watch out. So if you ask me a question, it's just like, you just attacked me. And if I react, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, I'm bad, that kind of thing. So it's just, that's all that place does. It never says love. It's just watch out. You're bad, I'm bad, somebody's bad. Separate from that. So that's my first response. The second response is more loving, capable. That's the part that got you through school. Say like, hey, we can do this, and we graduate, and then get a job. It's that sense of, if I pay for this, then I'll have a jet ski, or if I pay for this, then I'll go skiing. That front brain can do a hard task towards a goal if it says, hey, that's a good thing I want to do. And so that's one way to sort it out, just like the fast and the slow, the worst case or the more loving part. Another way to tell them apart is the back of my brain's like all or nothing. You always do this. You never do that. That you never care. You never love me. I am always doing all the work around here. So anybody's talking all or nothing language, that's the back of their head. Do
you need friction to break out of that? Because I'm thinking about myself when I'm really drained. Mm-hmm. When I'm really drained, I kind of can dwell on stuff like that.
Yeah.
So would you think that there needs to be some kind of friction to break through that? Or is there times where I'm not saying that specific, you never do this or I never, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's true. But is there, if it keeps lasting longer than 60 seconds, is there something there then, I guess? Or I don't
60
know,
seconds is the smallest dose I can get.
Oh, okay.
The other end is 3 days.
Wow.
So you can do something, and that part of my brain will dump enough brain chemistry. It physically takes 3 days to wash off one thing.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so that's, so time, they're looking at, hey, you upset me, and I could just say okay, let's look at how long it takes me to settle down from that. Mm-hmm. That's saying the size of the hurt you just caused. Oh, it's not you're bad or I'm bad. It's just that's how big of a pain this caused in me, and your brain washes off at a constant rate, which is why you have to take prescriptions at a specific schedule, because it's being washed off all the time. So that it takes me 3 days to calm down is saying it's a 5-alarm fire going off in here. It's just oh my gosh, it's just, it'll take a long time.
So, okay, I have lots of thoughts about where we can go with this, but do you think everything stems from our attachment from our childhood? Is that how we react to things, or
so you have a personality, and so the idea of some things are easier for you that might be hard for me, or something could be easy for me that's hard for you. So there is God gave you a personality and mm-hmm. strengths and weaknesses that way. But because I start with I can't communicate, mm-hmm. and I'm learning from my relationships, how do I get my needs met? Or do I just say, well, you guys won't meet my needs. I got to meet them myself, and that's another issue. But the attachment style is built on those emotional rules that are based on actual experiences in your early childhood. Mm. And there's no clock in your pain. So if it happened to you when you were 3, or when you're in high school, or your husband just did it, that part of your brain doesn't know and doesn't care. It's fast, not accurate. Mm. And so the work is to say, technically, it's a self-reflective capacity to say there's a me in here watching that reaction, and so it's I can see, do I do that or not? So with I guess an example would be with the roads, it's snowy today, and so that the back of your brain is just like, watch out, it's slippery, you're going to run into people, it's really terrible out there. And if you come over an overpass or by the river, there's these signs that say, watch for ice on bridge, where you're like, well, yeah, I'm going to give them more space, I'm going to do that. But that sign is there 365 days a year. How come you don't check for ice in August?
Because the likelihood is low?
Right. The big picture, front brain is saying the big picture is, it's summertime. There's no ice around here. If there was, I'd roll down the windows and cool myself off because it's hotter than blazes and there's smoke everywhere. But in the winter, that sign fits the big picture. And now I will do what it says. And so that back of my brain is like that sign that's there all the time. And front brain is saying, do I need to do that today or not? Do I listen to it or not? If I do, I'm going to listen. If not, like, I can blow on by that bridge in the summertime because there ain't no ice anywhere around there. It's just like, I'm safe. And so that's the idea of, I guess to your point about saying, if I have a reaction and it takes a long time to get out of it, you're not bad. It's just saying, if I can look at it as, oh, that's the amount of reaction I'm having, and what do I need? How do I need to calm myself down? It's just like, if I just wait, if I hold on to, that was an information question, I settle down on my own. But then my wife asks a second question. What are you putting in that container for? Back of my brain's like, you've attacked me twice. It keeps score, even though we didn't fight the first one. It's just looking at, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, as if you just married me to attack me. That's all you want to do. And so it's just protective. It doesn't do love or context. It's like, here's this, and then it does one-step solving, like do this all or nothing thing to solve it, which is why folks can get suicidal. They're just like, I'm in pain, I'm trying to solve the pain. Oh, kill yourself. I don't look at what happens tomorrow or who's going to get affected. It's just like, I'm trying to turn this pain off, or I'm going to kill you because same thing. Just like, you're bothering me so much, I'm going to just stop you, that kind of thing. So it's an all or nothing, no looking at the context or what happens the next day or the next step. It's like, I'm going to be this way forever, and I can't stand that. So I got to do this thing. And so that's where you kind of go through these different windows of what's, the temptation there. But then our free will is say, do you engage with that? Because it's like the temptation's there and then I follow it. Or do I say like, no, that's a temptation. And I say, no, you really love me. That's an information question. And then that becomes true. And so it's really that we do have that free will to say, which one do we go with? And part of, I guess, the difference between just secular psychology and like Christian or Catholic psychology is to say, I want to put my will and choosing first rather than my emotions. Because secular psychology is like, do your emotions do whatever it takes to feel good. We want you to feel good, get that crisis turned off and just solve it and just be good. It doesn't matter who you hurt or what you did, just solve it, turn it off. Where we're looking at, well, no, that's the devil on your shoulder side that's looking at, you're out to attack me, what's bad, no, I got to do that, versus, hey, I'm loving and this will be okay. So as a parenting example, you've got a little girl who is just having a meltdown and she's like, I'm not doing it. And you're like, okay, she's tired. She needs a bath. And you grab her in that old bear hug and she's like, I hate you and I never wanted to. She's like, and you're just wrestling and you're peeling clothes as you walk down the hall, kind of, and she's just like, rah, rah, and just like hates you and everything. And you're just like, yeah, I'm great. I know I love you, and you're a little girl having a meltdown. And then you run the bath, get the suds in there, and slide her in. She's like, thanks, Mom. I love you. Just like, I know you were tired. But that's kind of the idea is it's based on will and decision and what's the right thing in the big context. What's the goal I'm going towards, rather than just the emotion and shut this kid up, and just yell at her, throw her in the room, lock the door kind of thing, and just, you don't come out and I hate you too, kind of stuff. Just like I'm passing the anger back and forth. I hate you more, just like, well, you'll get over it. We'll both calm down.
It's kind of embarrassing, but half of the time when my kids, I have a almost 3-year-old and a 21-month-old.
You're right in the thick of it.
They're like 14 months apart. So anyways, but it can be an embarrassing, but sometimes I just like let them throw a tantrum and I'm just like, I'll just wait here. You can finish that.
Yeah.
And it's usually in public and it's really embarrassing, but I feel like if I try to do anything else, it just like makes it worse. If I just let them kind of do his thing. When he calms down, be like, all right, are you ready to do this? He'll be like, yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, because that's that wave of brain chemistry. It just goes and then it goes away on its own. That's the secret. It goes away.
That's amazing.
So the next part then is to say, in attachment work, if you're saying, okay, and it's kind of fun over at the school, if the kid's out on the playground, they're having a meltdown. You're just like, tell me about it. What's going on? They won't let me play soccer. They wouldn't let me be on the team. I'm like, oh, really? I understand and I agree. It feels bad. And now I just have to get, when they register, I get it. It turns off. They feel safe.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, now what do you want to do? Well, I'll go jump rope. Okay. And it's just like they turn right side up. And I don't have to go referee soccer players and get balls over here and make it be fair. Just like, I heard you, which is heart language for I care. I understand and agree it. Not you're bad, not I'm bad, not they're bad. It's just, it feels bad. Yeah. That's what my heart's looking for, is you get this feels bad. And when you get it, two things happen. I calm down and I feel close to you because you're safe. You get it.
I've also seen on social media, there was a parent who was saying, like, sometimes I just get down on their level and just whisper really quietly, like in a really calm voice, and I'll just say whatever they said to me. And he said, for some reason, that works with my kids. It calms them down. And I bet you it's that same thing.
Because you heard me. Yeah.
You
get it. That's the thing. It shifts from back brain to front brain.
And if we take this into the context of our faith, right? Like the whole God is love, but the reason that it's so powerful is because he sees us. Like he sees everything, the good and the bad. Yeah. And sometimes I think, for myself, I've thought in the past, like, I don't want anyone to see these parts of me. But when you go to confession and you let God in, you have this like complete transformation. Like, at least I do. I have like just like this relief, like physically you can feel the weight come off your shoulders. And it kind of seems like it's that same thing. It's like how we're made by him.
But that's how that works, because you're saying, if I go with, you're out to attack me, you don't care, I'm locked up and I'm just going to be defending. Anything you do is because you hate me, or I'm going to get back at you and kind of like pass the pain to you. And the point of that eye roll or the gesture or the slam in the door is to say, well, the amount of feeling I have is about like this. And I know, because we're married, this behavior gives you about this much feeling. So I'm going to do that. And the purpose is to transfer the feeling so you know how big it feels. That's the whole purpose of it. The facts and the data about it is just to say, do you feel this feeling? And if I say, oh my gosh, that feels that bad. Guess what happens? You calm down. It's like, oh, you become safe. You're not my enemy anymore. You get it. And you relax. And then you kind of can say, okay, now what are we going to do? How are we going to solve this, or parent through this, or whatever?
So do you think that, because we have these wounds, and if our brain doesn't forget, then does it compound? And if that's the case, then is there something true about what, a lot of people are talking about trauma nowadays, not saying, I'm not diminishing it, because people do experience trauma, but it seems like it's kind of like a buzzword right now about everyone talking about their trauma. So I guess what I'm hoping to ask is do our reactions come from that trauma? And like, because our brain compounds, like, oh, I had that feeling before, and so I'm going to like take longer to calm down from that? Or is it just something innate to someone's person?
Well, so my experiences, if I haven't dealt with it to heal them, they're there and they're trying to be healed by recreating what happened. I'm going to get that emotion back into the room. So I'm going to do or say something to recreate. Here's what it feels like. And it's kind of like, I had, like, say, if I had really abusive parents, and I've got this stuff of like, people that are close to you really mess you up. But then I get married. Well, so there's a part of me that says, you're the safe one. But the back of my brain says, but I've got this problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate in our marriage what happened in my childhood, because you'll love me and give me the right answer. But if you don't know that's what I'm doing, we'll fight. And we'll repeat the path again and again and again. So I keep recreating it because I'm looking for that answer of somebody to say, just get it. Listen, heal by it. It's emotional surgery in a sense that if I know, hey, you're loving and here's the pain, and I can lean into the love, the pain drains off. It goes to zero. It's trying to go to zero. I'm trying to go to calm, like back where we started. And so the idea of slowing it down, sorting it out to say, here's what I need, here's what I'm feeling, not you're bad, not I'm bad. But that's I guess, specifically in couples, is that sense of your triggering, your emotional pain triggers my emotional pain. So now I want you to care for me while you want me to care for you. So now we're stuck because one of us needs to stop and give care. It doesn't matter which one of us does, but neither one of us do, because we're saying, like, I'm in pain and I'm expecting you to just care because I love you, and you don't, so you're a jerk. So, and I'll just stuff and go do, and I'll come back again, and it'll keep recurring until we're able to slow it down. So that the idea of, like, that's how our nature that God built into us, and the counseling is helping you get the tools of saying, here's what's going on. There's 4 different sides of every topic. There's the worries that I have, and of course I'm loving and will handle it, and the worries you have, and the love that you can handle it. And so it's kind of 3 phases. The first phase is sorting out that I have 2 reactions, just to get that control and choice back. And for me, working on myself, that took about a month to kind of be able to hold on to, I'm good and loving, separate from the feeling in the room. I know I'm a good guy all the time. I'm a good dad, good husband, that kind of stuff. The second month was harder, because the second month is then saying, well, if they make posters about this and they write books about it, that means you think you're good too. That ain't true. I've lived with you and you're not, so it's just like, but the idea is attributing to the other person that you're trying to help, separate from how it feels. You're actually loving and trying to help me. That's that prudence, fortitude, and temperance piece. Mm-hmm. So I'm bringing that back in to say, no, you're loving, separate from how it feels. And I had to actually kind of really work through that to say, like, okay, you're actually trying to help me settle myself down and not get sucked into the old fight that we used to do. So then once I get, I'm loving and you're loving, now it's just, okay, so now we're both loving and we have this stressful problem. How are we going to solve it? I have some ideas. What are your ideas? And then we can move forward, solving the problem from 2 sides, and we get past it. And that's that kind of growth in virtue and growth in, as a couple, we're united front. We're going to parent the kids this way, or we're going to handle our finances together, and that kind of stuff, because it's just like we really are helping each other, because that's us at our best. But the hassle is that emotion is quick, not accurate, and it gets in the way. So a lot of this, I guess, just putting your faith in there is to say, if somebody didn't go to counseling and they're saying, like, all right, well, what the early church did is they had this thing where we're stopping what we're doing and we're going to go in and read the Psalms or a scripture and just focus on God loves us. And, the piece about the crucifixion, or even just this morning, I was thinking of the Our Father. To think of, Father, I know as a father, I'm loving, I'm helpful, I want my kids to be happy and successful, to get along. But when I was raising the kids, there's this phase, and your kids aren't there yet, but it's coming, to say when they're in junior high and high school, and you're taking them to school, and you're like, hey, let's just have a conversation. What do you want to talk about? You pick a topic, I'll pick a topic, it's fine. Silence. My first son, he played dead all the way to school. He was like kind of thing. Like, and the idea is, the back of my brain is like, no, you're going to criticize, you're going to attack me, you're going to point out my faults. It's really loud in those adolescent years that you're going to do it wrong. So as an example, people are coming into counseling and they're saying, like, our daughter's working on homework and finals are coming up. And when mom or the dad goes in and just looks to see, how you doing? Mom would be like, are you needing a break? And dad's like, I want to help you with math. Doesn't say anything and leaves. The daughter's like, you just attacked me. Nothing was said.
Yeah.
They come back an hour later. Now she's working on a different subject. Nothing was said. They leave. You've attacked me twice.
Yeah.
Third time they come in. Now, she's doing math. I want to help. Oh my gosh, you've attacked me. And dad's like, what the heck? I was just coming to help you. And just like, totally blasted. Or the mom's bringing cookies because you've been working so hard. I'm bringing you cookies and milk. And the daughter's like, what are you doing? You've been attacking me all day. And just like, and so then they have this big fight. But it's just that back of my brain is going with, worst case scenario. And what's my fear? You're attacking me. You're critical. I'm not good enough.
Is that because of, like, the brain development? You said it was the amygdala that does that? Is it just growing, or?
It's physically faster.
Oh, okay.
And so it's all your life, it's physically faster than the front of your brain. So I feel like you're walking on the green belt and this dog jumps the fence and comes running at you. You're just like, oh my gosh, and you run for the car and shut the door. And then once you're inside, then you're looking at, hey, is it a Doberman or a Dalmatian? And I can check out what kind of dog it is. But if I was sitting there while the dog's running at me, say like, I wonder what kind of dog that is. It's going to chew my legs off. So it's like, it's good to say that part's going to shut off and I'm going to run for my life. And so it's a safety feature. And that's the hassle is that part when I'm upset never says I love you or anything good. That's the first thing to go away is any good thoughts about you. That's just saying I'm on stress here. And so the idea of that I'm teaching, I'm here, like back to the thing about the faith, saying like they aren't going to counseling, but if they say like, our Father, and my sense of what's an ideal father, he's going to be loving. And the prodigal son, good example. I go out and blow through everything and he takes me back. He isn't like, where were you? Or the Jesus in the boat. And that's one of my favorite stories because he's like, he's there, there's the storm, and he's the hill kid from Nazareth, and we're the fishermen, we've been on the lake all our life, and he's sleeping. And then the storm happens, and we're dying here, don't you care? And, if it would have been me, I'd have been like, well, I'm the hill kid, remember? You told me to sit in the back of the boat. And I'd have done a little scolding first while the boat sinks. But he's just like, be still. And he doesn't scold him. And it's like, well, there's a good father. What an example. The people freaking out all around him. He's just like, be still. And he's out walking on the water. Don't be afraid, and just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. But that's the thing I'm dealing with as a regular parent. Back to the car saying like, I'm a good dad, but I have to state that to say, let's have a discussion. And let them settle down to see it's just a discussion, not an attack or a critique. It has to be taught. And so the idea of if I just did through the scriptures and looking at examples of how God is a loving father, how is he loving? It says he's merciful in forgiveness. Where? What's the story? So then if I spend time meditating, and the early church fathers did that, they would stop several times a day. And that's the monastic life now. It's like we're going to stop 3 to 5 times a day. And whatever we're doing, and we're going to go in and just soak in that for a few minutes. Like, we're loved, and we're good, and we're working on getting to heaven. And the guy that loves us and has forgiven us and wanting us to get there is right here. And then they go back and do a couple more hours work. And then they come back and say, like, oh my gosh, we're loved again. And so that is kind of, they're training themselves to soak in that I'm loved, I'm forgiven. And if I have a problem, like you said, you go to confession, there's this relief. Because it's a loving father that's saying like, yeah, I forgive you. Like you could be a loving parent. So one of the things you can start with is just when my kids were born, you go from like the pregnancy, you're getting ready, and then the baby's born. You're just like, oh my gosh, this love just shows up. And it's just like, I am so loving. And the baby's just laying there and all they do is sleep or poop on you. Just like, oh my gosh. You're like, ah. But there's this love that's there saying like, oh, that's what love feels like.
Yeah.
And I have that. And so that's the first step is just saying, here I am loving. Then the second part is to say, well, I know how that feels. Let's attribute that to my spouse or my kids or the other person. They have that capacity to love me too. So now, and that's in marriage counseling, to say, I'm loving, you're loving, and this is a problem. Or you're upset, but you're still loving. And we can talk it through. But so I start with I'm loving, then we go to like, well, you're loving like that too, and I can receive that. And then because, a relationship's going well enough, we have moments of that. But then to say the spiritual pieces that say that God is loving toward us that way. And so then the scripture example would be like if you go to the baptism of Jesus, and there where he's, in the river, and the sky opens up, but put yourself in his shoes to say like, here I am. The sky opens up and says, you are my beloved daughter. I am so happy you're alive. I'm glad you're here. Let's have some fun together, walking through your life together. Just like, but I need to soak in that, 5 minutes a day, several times a day, to kind of get that where it's like it's part of me, and it's like now I have this calm place to go when there's the kids having a meltdown or somebody throws up on the floor. Be like, I can go there and say it's okay, it's just a mess, we'll clean it up. Not like, I'm going to kill you because I was working so hard and so one more thing, I had that one nerve and you just got on it, kind of thing.
I feel like with little kids, I can really relate to that. Most of the time, I almost feel like recently I was watching Another Child, and so I had 3, and I'm also pregnant, and I remember that everyone was having a meltdown. We got them into the car seats, and everyone was, and I feel like I had a breaking point, but like in a good way, where I was like, I feel like the one thing that it's taught me having children is that you have to let go. If you try to control everything, you'll go insane.
Yeah.
So
very exhausting.
I remember just like laughing, like driving down. I'm like, I feel like I'm an insane person, but I'm not stressed right now because everyone's going crazy, and I just think it's so funny. Like, of course, all 3 of them are having meltdowns in the back of the car. It was actually it was a really funny moment for me, but I often feel like it can be that last straw sometimes when you're being asked too much, especially when my son is very particular. So you sit down for dinner and he's like, well, I want water. And then you get him water. I want water with ice. Okay. I want water with ice and juice. And you're like, I am not getting up from this table again. We're done. You're going to drink your water plain. No ice, no juice. Yeah.
Well, or just, because you go through the story, we had one of the ladies that was watching our kids when they were little, couldn't have children. And so when she went to the store, she got them things. And then when we went on Saturday to get groceries and stuff, they're like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And it was just like, I'm going to say, no, no, no. And it's just like, okay, we're wearing each other out. And so the shift was to say, yeah, that's a great idea. Put it on the list. We're buying the stuff on the list. So when we get home, write it on the list.
Oh.
It's really nice because when they're not seeing it, they don't think of it. Yeah. And so it kind of settled down. Oh, yeah, that's a really great thing. I could see why you want that, but it's not on the list for this trip. So when we get home, write it on the list.
Will they write it on the list?
No.
Yeah. My best friend takes a picture of all the toys that her kids want. Oh, we'll put it on, I'll take pictures of it with you next to it, with how, if you want it really bad, smile as big as you can so that you know that your grandparents and whoever on your birthday know how to get it for you or whatever. So
I really want this. But the idea is that's that fast part of my brain. And it's like, people that are compulsive shoppers, because it feels good for 10 minutes. I got brain chemistry just dancing around in my head like, oh my gosh. So when we're working with folks to say well, I can go to the store and I get it and I put it in the cart, but I got to walk around for 10 minutes, not go to the checkout. So that it's better to go to the store and walk it off than to sit there at Amazon because you'll click, 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 and then $2,000 worth of therapy. And you're like, I didn't need any of that.
So this was attachment therapy, but you said that there's different types of therapy that you practice in. Is that correct? Yeah. Or is attachment therapy like the main one that you focus on?
Well, so the attachment therapy is that sense of I express my pain and it's either I care for it or you care for it, and then there's this bonding and calming and we move forward. So that's kind of the basis for healing traumas. Cognitive therapy is just saying hey, you got these 2 brain pathways, and it's like a 7-step worksheet where you say okay, the fast part of your brain's the negative one. Let's write about that. What's the evidence to support it? And then is there any exception anywhere? Oh, okay, then what's the exception and what's the evidence to support that? And then you compare the 2. So you got front brain, back brain, and now you're comparing. And just that you're doing that cuts the bad one in half. It turns the volume down. And depending on, and so there's tools about breaking that one problem into parts to make it more manageable, and you can break it down. It's just like from book to chapter to page to paragraph to sentence. I mean, it's just like breaking it down from okay, we have categories like finances and travel and parenting and the house and inside the house and outside the house and, your romantic life and our diets and our medicine. So there's different categories. That'd be the chapters. And then under each chapter, they're going to be okay, in the parenting, here's the stuff we need to do for our routine, and there's going to be a list of things. And then under those, it might be okay, so when we're doing the dinner, who sets the table? It could be parts on that. So you break it down to say, okay, we're training this little guy to set the table. And now we're going to focus on just doing that until he can do it without a meltdown. It takes about a week. And then it's just sweet. And we have built his little brain pathway, and he can do that. So that's going to be more cognitive behavioral, or love and logic parenting is really kind of using that. We're using some attachment stuff as well. The chronic pain management is just, it's kind of mindfulness with the front brain, back brain, and where you're sitting kind of in the front brain looking and monitoring the pain levels to say like, okay, it's this much. How much can I do before it wears me out so that I'm not overdoing it? So that temperance, fortitude, and prudence is kind of, I want to get that balance to say, if I can do 3 hours worth of stuff, I'm going to do like 2 hours so that I'm not wiped out and in bed for the next 3 days recovering from overdoing it. Yeah. So I've got to kind of pace myself. And in a relationship, the idea of having where, what do I like to do now? What kind of is a recharge and something fun for me now? And just as a family or as a couple to say, well, let's look at that each year, because stuff that I like this year might be different than what I liked last year.
Yeah.
My changes. Yeah.
Seen some. I loved Matt Fradd and Cameron Fradd. They talk about every year they do like an intake of their year of like where they did things well and where they did things not well.
Yeah.
But one of the things they talk about is they're like, sometimes we realize that we created a habit that's not sustainable.
No good.
Like
can't keep doing that.
Yeah. And so then that's the time where they reevaluate. They have like monthly ones that are shorter, but they have one like big planning one every year. And I've always thought that was really interesting, because then you can be like, okay, yeah, like this was good for this long, and then it became unsustainable, and like we need to reevaluate and work as a couple so that we can like distribute that again. Okay, so did you say that there was 3?
Well, so the other so there's like trauma therapy and different tools with that, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, and what that one's for, or how I'm using it, is just to get that range of awareness, because the back of my brain is just on or off. It's 0 or 100. And to learn that, no, there's actually all those numbers between 0 and 100. And so, as an example, my anxiety from, if it went 0 to 100, 0 to 20 is like mild stress. And so I'm actually going to perform better. I'm going to remember stuff, do better, drive better, perform better in school or on tests, that kind of stuff. So mild stress is good. Then 20 to 40 is kind of like in the medium range, and I start to get tunnel vision, but I can still learn things. And then, so 40 to 60 is kind of like high stress. At that point, I have tunnel vision, or maybe just focused on details, or I'm jumping from this detail to that detail. And at that point, I'm only halfway up the stress scale. I can't learn anymore. I am just reacting. But then there's still like 60 to 80 is panic, and that's where it's distorted details. It's not even connected to the whole picture anymore. And then 80 to 100 is terror, where I'm disconnected from reality completely. I'm in just a bubble inside my head and reacting to things. And so if we're working on things, to say, a lot of times I break it into 3 different zones. So 0 to 50 is kind of ordinary life. You're just feeling and dealing with stuff. You have stuff, you react, you calm down. 50 to 75 is stress. And that, I got to talk to you differently when you're in that range. And then 75 to 100, you're overwhelmed. And at that range, nothing works. And if it's long term, you need medication. And so otherwise, it's just this wave washes over my brain, and I've just got to wait while the child does the and they settle back down and remember, like, oh yeah, I have a parent, and I'm back in my body again, kind of thing. And so that idea of the reaction that I have, the tool that I need depends a lot on the emotional level of the person you're working with, whether it's your spouse or your kids. Because if it's like 0 to 50, you can say like, hey, brush it off, get in there and clean your room, or brush your teeth, or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, okay. But if I say that, they're like, no, when they have a meltdown, it's like, oh, so now you're on a deeper end of the pool. Now I got to say like, oh, tell me about it. And I just got to agree that is upsetting, or that is painful, or that is bad. Not I'm bad, not you're bad. It feels bad. And I just have to stay there until you recognize I'm getting it. And then you turn down that feeling automatically, and you feel close to me, and then you shift back to that below 50, and we can do the regular go clean your room. So it's just like, you're back, you're a regular kid again. But in that overwhelmed place, that part is, if I can do stuff physically to help you settle down, like that deep breathing, or, if there's something that they can do in that place to settle down, that's going to be helpful. But if they have that, I'm overwhelmed, this is bad, you're bad, then, it's never going to end kind of stuff. I can take a step back and say, okay, I can go do something else for a while and come back and check, like, how you doing now? And as long as you're in that, man, it's bad and you're bad, like, okay, I'll check back later. Just let them settle. And then when they're back into, okay, I can communicate, I'm back, I can think, I can talk. So I'm asking a thinking question to see, do you have access to that part of your brain yet? And so it's just like, what do you think? Tell me some details about that. But if you're in the blame mode or the accuse mode or that kind of stuff, saying like, okay, well, you're in that high end, front brain isn't there, you're not learning. It's like you're drunk on emotions in a sense. It's just like, I'm going to have to just wait, or if we can do stuff. And part of that is just like being the person in the room, because babies don't have language. And so if the baby's like, wah, and I'm just like, and that's where you get that you're rocking and you're like, it's okay, that sing-songy voice and you're rocking. I'm doing body language that's calm. And so technically there's a research project called Heart Math that's measured this. And they said that little wavy line, but if they get an EKG, that wavy line between the heartbeats is your emotion. So your heart is like a radio that's pumping your emotion into the room. Mm-hmm. And it's also a radio picking up the other person's emotion. So that's not how you know where to go in a room or where to sit and that kind of stuff. Or if you walk into the room and the kids were fighting, but they stop, like, I know something was happening in here, because you can feel that physically that something's going on. But back to the thing with the baby's upset, if I'm calm and just like, it's okay, we'll get through this, the baby gets it. And that attunement, they settle down to my level of functioning. That's why an upset parent can't calm an upset kid, because it's like, we're just matching motions. It's like that. It's just like, we're both overwhelmed. I have to actually be calmer, and it's like they settle down to that place.
Yeah.
But
that's, yeah, I can attest to that. Like, I think everyone has the experience where you walk in a room and you're like, oh,
yeah,
I don't know what was going on, but there's definitely a feeling here, some kind of tension, and I just walked in, I have no idea what's going on. I think everyone's experienced that at one point in time. Mm-hmm. I do have a question though. I have heard that women are more in tune to like facial expressions and some of that like other stuff. Is that, do you think because that we have the capacity to be mothers and need to be in tune with that? Do you think it's like a developmental thing, or do you think
it's how God made you?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's like, you have those abilities and guys have other abilities. And that's just that we're complementary, and that the 80s were wrong. We're not identical. We're not the same. Sorry. Hate to spoil it for you, but yeah, 80s were wrong. And folks are starting to get that, like, women think different than guys. And that was something at the men's conference that they were talking about, that it's even down to the cellular level, the differences between men and women. It's just DNA, cellular stuff. It's not just what you look like. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions that I've been really wanting to ask you, and this is kind of moving into some of the questions that we prepared for a little bit, would be, how can we start to see our identity in God versus the attributes that we possess or that other people possess? So like,
isn't that nice?
Yeah.
And the easy answer is, since Jesus became a person, just like, oh my gosh, we're made in his image. Us, we look like God. God looks like us. It's just like that. We're made in his image. And then on top of that, we have the ability to think and feel and love and do things that, like virtuous things. And so that there's, our understanding of our mind, body, and spirit. We have a soul. And so that spiritual part has the qualities that are like God, that are that free will, that thinking, that reason, that emotion, the intellect, that's there. And that spiritual part of us, our soul. And then we have our body that has the attributes of, like being tall or short or male or female and that kind of thing. And so to say, if I just look at I played that football game, or I, made that pizza, or I raised these kids, to say, well, that's an attribute that I did, but there's a me in here that's doing that. Yeah. And so the idea of I'm made in the image of God, which is the intellect and will specifically, but then we have the other accidents and powers and faculties that we can use, but we're choosing and we're directing that. And so the idea of, I guess, being more aware of that there's a me in here. And so a tool that just to help you get in touch with that is, I'm taking this from Dan Siegel's book about it's a developing mind, and he's several things, but it's just his wheel of awareness tool, if you've heard of that. And so the idea is, he said, the model that he used was like the table in his office. So he said, like, the first side of the table is, let's look at what do you see, touch, hear, smell, or taste. So the idea of, like, I have all that sensory data. Thomas Aquinas said, like, yeah, you have that sensory input, and there's a you that's looking at that and saying what it is. Thomas Aquinas adds that then you have this common sense power, which then puts it together to say, this is a water bottle, these are glasses, this is a cup. It's common, it's putting all the sensory stuff together to make that as an object, and this is what it means, and this is what it does. Dan Siegel doesn't do that. So then the second side of the table is, I have this body. And so he does a body scan. And I adjust that to say, like, well, you can do a progressive muscle relaxation. So you just tense a muscle group, like you tense your jaw, and feel that for like 5-6 seconds, and then release it, and you feel the difference. It's like, oh, there's my face. And then you can tighten your neck and your shoulders, your arms, and go down your arms and your fingers and your hands. And then you go down your body and your waist and your legs down to your feet and curl your toes. But the idea is that there's that awareness of my body in space and the sensory stuff that it's taking in. But there's a me in here that's aware that I have a body. That's the second side. Then you go to the third side to saying, like, well, you know, all these thoughts that I got going and feelings and memories, I can sit and watch that and see, like, you know, how do they show up? How do they leave? And I can sort, and that's different from what Dan Siegel is doing, what I'm doing, is saying, like, well, let's sort that into there's good thoughts and bad thoughts, and there's space in between them. That it's like I'm watching it like it's on a movie screen rather than I'm in it. And then, so it's like I have sensory data, body, and now I have even my thoughts and feelings. There's me watching them. And then you go to the center, that center of the table, and because we can be, you know, spiritual and Catholic and Christian, say, like, hey, there's my soul. There's a me inside that's watching all of that in my core. And that's kind of like evidence to me for the soul. And he can't say that because he's at a medical school, so he's got to be politically correct. But the idea of, I have this soul, and he said across languages, cultures, and religions for over 25 years now, he's found very consistently that when you get that there's a me inside, that me, that core is calm, loving, peaceful, helpful, wise. And it's like, say, the kingdom of God is within you. He's got empirical evidence to say, yeah, there's a you inside that's watching that. So technically that's called a self-reflective capacity, that there's a me in here. And it's hard to build, but once you build it, it's like, now, hey, all that emotion's up on the surface, but I can drop into this calm. It's always calm inside me there.
Is the practice that you just took us through of, like, seeing the things around us and then seeing our, like, physical attributes and doing all of that, is that just like a practice you would do to try to find that? Or
yeah, it's really easy. Yeah,
just like that. And then obviously, I mean, since we're Catholic, we can talk about, like, reflection in Scripture and what God reveals to us as well. But do you think those two together would help with that?
Well, for sure. Yeah, that you have a purpose and a direction for it, because what he does, he's kind of getting into this, like, then from that place you reach out to the fourth side of the table, where you're just reaching out and feeling that loving connection to your spouse, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and then he spreads it to people in the Northwest, to people in the U.S., people in America, then people all over the world, every living being everywhere. So it's kind of generic that way.
It's interesting that he says that, though, because, and this is Dan Siegel, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting because doesn't Aquinas kind of talk about a similar thing where you have to love, it's like your circle of responsibility, right? So it's like you have your spouse and then your kids and then your extended family and then your church community and then your town and then you're like, and he goes out of, like, your responsibility. So I just thought that was an interesting parallel.
Yeah. And so the idea then is just the Catholic frame of that is saying, like, there's a me in here that I'm watching. And so that, like we were talking earlier about putting my will first rather than my emotions first, that's the power of that. Because now I can be good and calm and loving when the kids are having a meltdown or the smoke alarm's going off, or, you know, there's a problem I'm dealing with.
So that self-awareness then is basically the ability to detach yourself from I did a bad thing versus, or like that was a bad action versus I'm bad myself.
Right.
Gotcha.
Because that's a big difference. And so in attachment work, they're saying like, shame is, early childhood. And it's like, it's bad, I'm broken, I can't be forgiven. And it's all or nothing thinking. And then about 4 years old, it shifts into guilt where it's like, well, that was a bad thing, but I fixed it. So if I spilled coffee on you, I'd be like, oh my gosh, let me clean it up. And I'll get you a new cup, but I'll set it on the table and let you pick it up so I don't spill it again, because it's like it can be repaired. Where the shame-based stuff, like injuries early in your childhood, is just like, it can't be fixed, I'm bad. And so that sense of, and that's, like working with kids that have been traumatized, and one of the tasks is just some kind of compliance. So it's like, can you hand me a Kleenex? You're like, nope. Why not? I'll guarantee I'm not going to hurt you. Like, no, because it's a life or death. If I do that, I'll die. So I'm protecting myself. And even though it's a Kleenex, or straighten up these magazines, it's like, nope. It's like, and it's a life and death struggle. I can't do it. But then as an adult, you have this thing in your marriage where it's just like, I can't forgive you for that. Or you can't forgive me for this. I'm so bad and I'm beating myself up. I can't be forgiven. That's a shame-based rule. That the rest of you knows, well, yeah, I can, but that part's like, no, and it's fast, not accurate. And now the work is, now we're bringing Jesus into that to say like, okay, if we invite Jesus in here and you say, here's this thing, what does he say? What does he do? How would we, have that as a discussion? Or if you have a loving spouse, if they can do that, 'cause some folks can't imagine Jesus, like, no, he's going to come in like this mad dad just saying you're bad. Like, okay, we don't want that. So we would need to really kind of connect it to, there is love. And so for me, I tend to go to, well, you know how you felt that love when your child was born or when you were first married? There's just that love right there. So like, okay, that's love. Let's just hold on to that. Can you access that? And so the emotional surgery is like, I have to hold on to that while I have the shame in the room at the same time. And then what I'm doing is, on a biology level, front brain and back brain are talking, sharing information, saying it's over, I can be forgiven. On an emotional level, it's like I'm releasing that safely because I'm just leaning into the love and letting that pain go. And on a spiritual level, it's just like God's, grace and love is coming in, and I'm washing off, the sin. So that, like you said, go into confession. There's kind of a biology level, an emotional level, and a spiritual level all happening, following the same rules. So confession is very therapeutic if I'm seeing it's a loving Father that I'm talking to, and not just back brain. It's just like, checklist, I went and did it, and I'm out, but did you really get forgiven? Am I, just like, and I can be scrupulous. And so the idea of seeing, and it's really nice that God put this in, what you do to the others, you do to me, to say like, oh, so how we relate to each other really connects and parallels the spiritual world so well that you can understand, here's what a relationship is like. What's a loving relationship is like. And I have written in my heart a sense of, here's the right way it should be done. So I'm not going to parent in an abusive way. I'm going to parent, even though I didn't have a model for it, I've got a sense of what's the right thing to do. And folks that have a spiritual life can, really access that more. Or like you're saying, the needle is pointing. It's like, it's louder, and I'll be able to follow it and trust it.
Well, and I wonder if that's a reason why during Vatican II, they really encouraged the laity to start praying the Liturgy of the Hours more intentionally. I wonder if that was, like, if this kind of goes into that. Because when you were talking about the monastic life, right, I was also thinking about, my husband and I just started praying the Liturgy of the Hours at night, just night prayer. But, and I think he's trying to do it more often. But I think when you were talking about, like, pausing throughout your day to, like, meditate on how you are loved and that God loves you and that he's merciful. There's also, like, wisdom in the church of, like, being like, yeah, like, this is the prayer of the church. Like, we need to be praying this. Like Mass first, right? Obviously. And then I think they say the Liturgy of the Hours next. So, again, it's just, like, beautiful wisdom from our...
Or even just a daily rosary, because that was part of the thing, because the monks were doing, going through the 150 Psalms every day, and then they got to, they go through 50, and I was looking up the history of the rosary recently, and just, the debate about that, and some scholars are saying, like, it's pretty obvious, and all these popes are saying it was, St. Dominic when Mary appeared to them, and they say, like, well, but he never said that. It was this theologian 200 years later that said, he had this dream about Mary giving Dominic the rosary, and so then he popularized that vision was from a later theologian. But the practice goes back before that, but they were doing that. And so the idea of folks that didn't know or have the Psalms could just pray an Our Father. They would say Our Fathers. And then it got to Our Fathers and Hail Marys. But so, and on a spiritual side now, you hear several different priests or podcasts saying about, I've got this assault weapon, and they hold up a rosary kind of thing. It just, and I actually came across a video recently. It was a near-death experience. And this lady was a school teacher who said that she would go in and pray over her students' desks. And that was just kind of her regular practice. And then she had this stroke. She was in the hospital and had this near-death experience. And she said God showed her prayers had this effect, and it was driving evil away from the kids. And the day she didn't do it, it didn't drive them away. She's like, oh my gosh, you got to say prayers every day. And just bringing the power of prayers, just like they really do work. They do what they say they do.
Yeah.
And so, of course, then the temptation is like, do it later. It isn't making a difference. It tries to talk you out of it. Anything except God. They want you to focus on something else. And the saints are saying, like, no, focus on God, where you're going. You're getting to heaven. So based on that goal, how does what you're doing fit into your life? Yeah. And so you have that priority. So having the faith really does give you a direction and help you settle down and have a capacity to handle things, because we're not in control. Yeah. Bummer, but we're not. So there we go.
Beautiful. Really then, do you ever think that there is, when you were talking about this just a second ago, about how like our prayers really do what they say, but do you, I guess a question I would have is, do you feel like you, is there like a spiritual side to all of this? I know that earlier you were saying that you work with some of the exorcist communities.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, do you think that there are, or how as a therapist would you differentiate between someone being maybe like not coached, but like influenced by, like,
that's a nice way to put it. I'm getting coached.
Influenced
by certain types of individuals.
Yeah. How would you discern, like, if this is something that needs to be addressed with therapy versus a spiritual attack?
It's easy. Okay. Yeah,
I guess because you kind of think about like the inner critic, right? And it could be attributed to your amygdala, right? But it also could be something else.
Yeah.
So
then what do you do?
What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So there's 9 different levels of possession. And so the first 3 are oppression, where your thoughts are getting pushed towards the bad thing. Then
I'm telling you, the dial.
Yeah. The second 3 are obsession, where you're just really fixated on it. And then the last 3 are actual possessions. And it goes intermittent towards more and more, actually, you got a writer telling you what to do. Yeah. And those guys you don't see too much, because they pretty much have a whole, just like a drug lord with all these drug dealers below them. It's just like chain of command. So in society right now, we're kind of level 3 to level 4. Everybody's getting pushed, and some folks are obsessing about the evil stuff. And so to your question about how do you know? Well, because it's happening all the time. Everybody's dealing with it. And that's part of what the church is trying to teach with having a prayer life and the sacraments, is pushing that back to give you the freedom to choose. Because otherwise it's fast, it's loud, it's like the devil goes first and then Jesus responds. And that's just the timing of it. And then here's this worst case scenario. You're bad, I'm bad, somebody's bad. There's no love in that part. And so you get the temptation. And then, like I said, if you pick up on it, and then the rest is you. I'm just doing what I was inspired or tempted to do. And if I resist it, and so there's at least 5 stages of going into a temptation or going away from it. And so you get the temptation, and it's like the spiritual world, they're pitching constantly, like, do this, try this. And they're always trying to say, which one will you bite on? Which one will you say, like, oh my gosh, my daughter's going to do this, or my kid's going to get on drugs, or I'm going to lose my job. And it's just like they're pitching for your fear. And they're just kind of hovering around that, poking it all the time to say, will you go for it? So then you're like, oh my gosh, this is bad. And you start to look at it. When you start to look at it, God responds with an inspiration saying like, ooh, don't do that. If I listen, there's the exit, and I come out of it, and I'm free. If I'm just a minute, I'm going to solve it, or I'm going to prevent it, I go farther in, and then it's got me. And I go wherever it takes me. And so the idea of God is there offering a choice, but I've got to watch. It's really subtle, because you have this thing of like, don't do that. You kind of have this sense of, but do you listen or not? Do you follow that? And the folks that do come out of it. And there's a book, not Catholic by any means. It's like The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. And he was talking about, he was a FBI agent that tracked serial killers. And he said the folks that got away were the folks that listened to that voice. They were able to, just like the one gal gets kidnapped and, he's abusing her, and then he goes to get the kitchen to get a knife to come back and kill her. And she had this thing about get up, follow him, turn left, turn right, and she got away.
Whoa. Yeah.
And just listen to that. And he said, like, where folks would be like police officers, for example, that don't listen. He said, like, there's a robbery going on. They walk into the store and they get shot. Where there's like this sense of don't do this or do that, and so that's really, it's like the angel on your shoulder, devil on your shoulder on the spiritual level is constantly going. And it's just like you get pushed for fears, or you get inspirations to get out of them. And then you get that sense of, do I want to solve it myself? I'm going to take control. Or do I say like, no, I'm going to follow this? Yeah. And then, it might be, and for stuff you can solve, there might be that kind of an exit. But for stuff, really the hard part is we're not in control of some of the things, and we don't control the time when stuff ends, or we get over it, or they get over it. And that is really strong to say, just, I can't wait. And so looking at it from a spiritual template to say, well, what if you're getting this hard stuff and God isn't like, oh, I'll just turn that off and take it away and you'll have this nice smooth road all the way to heaven. Well, that's what we want, but that's not how it works. And so the idea is we have this difficulty, and Jesus is saying, I want to go with you, and I'll help you get through that. And we're going through it rather than just turn it off. And that's more often the case in our life, that we'll have a difficult thing. And so the purpose is to build trust that God is who he says he is, and he's really going to get us through it, and it'll work out. So even if you're losing your job or going bankrupt or you got a really bad illness, the purpose on a spiritual level is to build your trust in God and patience. It's developing virtue. And in the Middle Ages, before they had all this technology, they actually mapped that out. And so the virtue ladders were really popular back then. And so one of the most famous ones was the Dante's Divine Comedy, where you have 7 levels of hell, 7 levels of purgatory, 7 levels of heaven. But if you look at what's going on, it's like you're faced with this problem. Do you solve it, or do you work and build this virtue to overcome it? And then you get a break. And then you get the next attack. And do you overcome that? And you get this complementary virtue. And so just as a brief template for that is to say, whatever you're tempted towards, the antidote is to do the opposite. And so if I'm tempted to greed, I've got to be generous. If I'm tempted to, money, I've got to be, sharing or, being able to donate to charities. If I'm tempted to lust, I've got to do purity. And so the virtue opposite the temptation is the answer. And so I'm practicing that, and it breaks faster than just knuckling through.
Or what kind of advice would you give to someone on balancing their dial? You know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't want to be.
Yeah. So, how can we, because sometimes it seems like it could be easy to fall into something like off camera, we were talking about my daughter's eczema, and it literally can become an obsession of me being like, have I tried this? Have I tried that? Yeah. What am I doing? How do I do it better? Am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? That kind of stuff. So I guess in a simple example like that, but just for people every day, what is the best way to kind of round out this idea of self-awareness and all of these different things that we've talked about along with the spiritual side? Okay.
So I start with, on the biology level, that you have these 2 different places and you're looking at that problem. And so the back of your brain is like, all the stuff you're not doing right, or this you're not doing, she's not doing, whatever, there isn't solutions for. And so the idea of, I guess, shifting from that to like a camping example, and saying, like, if you're up in the mountains and say, like, hey, you have to get up in the night, and the back of your brain is like, there could be bears out there, you step on a rock and cut your foot, you could poke a branch in your eye, you're just like, but you can sit and you can argue through all the possible things that could go wrong and how you could get hurt, and then you could kind of solve them one after the other. But the back of your brain is going to keep generating more, what about this, what about that? And so, like with your daughters, like, what about this, did I try this, and that kind of stuff. So that place in me never gets a perspective of, how much effort I've done and that kind of stuff. So I really have to shift to front brain. And the front brain is just like in the camping example would be like, let me look at how beautiful the stars are. God's creation is wonderful. So I'm going away from the dangers and looking at the love, looking at all the beauty that's here. And so with your, if your child is having health issues, you could say, well, what about this? What about this? And just that I'm looking for problems is a sign that I'm in stress. I'm in the room of stress in my head. I want to shift to, here's how I'm loving, and I have tried, and what can I do to anchor myself over there to say, I have checked the medical things. I've checked the diet. I've checked the medicine. I've checked the times of the day. We've got different sheets. We're cleaning the air conditioner. We're doing those things to help to say, that 0 to 50, 0 to 100 range is to say, I have done everything possible. If something new comes up, I'll be glad to try that. But I need to kind of spend time. So the volume knob is details. If I'm in the details of what's not going right, the needle flips over there and I'm stressed. If I go to the details of what I did right, here I've applied this lotion and that has an effect. I've cleaned these fans. That has an effect. I've changed this kind of thing in the diet. That has an effect. I've given this medicine. And so the time that it takes physically changes brain chemistry, like we were talking earlier about gratitude. And if you only had what you prayed about that you're thankful for, that really does make a difference. And that gratitude equals pharmaceuticals. And so if I can look at what I'm doing well, but this key is I need bullet points on the worry and paragraphs on the love, because that is going to shift me. It's washing off brain chemistry. I'm going to settle down. I can still look for new possible treatments and breakthroughs. Maybe a friend has a new thing to try, but I don't have to be like on that life and death edge constantly looking and searching and going to generate a new thing. I'll make it myself, I'll try this new thing. To be able to say, well, I'm doing what I can. We will get through this. And if it helps, just using your imagination, and that was something in spiritual direction, like St. Francis de Sales and those people from 300 years ago, when they were writing about spiritual stuff, they really had people use their imagination, like you're in this scene, like you're in the throne room of God, and here's the angels, and here's the saints, and all the things that are there. But now I got to look at, what do I see? What do I hear? What's the smell in heaven? What's the texture? What's the feel? Is there a breeze blowing? Is it warm? Is there sunshine coming from somewhere or light coming from there? But the details take time, and time is what the front of your brain needs to calm down, to wash off the stress. And it's going to help you shift the needle to that, I'm being a good parent, and if there's new things, I'll try it. And I know with families that had, their kids have cancer or leukemia or something like that, that's a lot of the work, is just to say, we are doing the things that are available, but it still takes time to go through the treatments and for the medicine to kick in, for the cancer to be remediated. And it isn't just we did it and it turns off. There's still this process. Or if you have a child with a broken bone, same thing. It's casting and it heals over time. And you're not bad that it takes time to heal. But if it's something I'm powerless about, that really is like, oh my gosh, it's like a magnet to steel. I really want to try to solve and fix because I love them and I care. I just overdo. I'm going to fix it instead of saying, like, Lord, what do you want me to learn from this situation? And he's going to be building trust and patience, and you're going to see the love there. Or using your imagination to say, Lord, let's go, help my daughter. Or let's go, to this job interview. And that wider perspective And over time, like we've done this, we're doing this, and it's going to take some time to fix. That wider perspective really is calming.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I guess the last thing I would say then, just to wrap up, if anyone is drawn to the way that you approach these things, where could they find you to seek help or to just get connected with you?
Okay, I'm at Cornerstone Psychological in town, and so that phone number is 208-373-0790, or cornerstonepsy.com is the website, and you can find me there, and be glad to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I am just blown away. I love all this stuff, so it's really been quite interesting, and I feel like I've learned a lot.
Oh, good.
And I'm really excited that we had you on. So I just want to thank you again for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll be talking again soon.
Okay. Thank you much.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.